Good evening. ICC expert Christoph Safferling will sit down with the first analytical tonight. Mr. Safferling, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Good evening. I'm glad to be here.
You have just lectured on the origins of criminal justice from Young Turks to Nazis, shedding light on events that took place a century ago. Why do you believe this historic excursion is relevant? What's the practical value in it?
Well, you know, the idea of actually having international law being guided by concrete criteria that can actually be executed, i.e. by criminal law, just sort of came about in 1945 with the Nuremberg trial that took place in order to prosecute the former Nazi criminals. So we have a change in history at that point. Previously, you know, wars were not followed by criminal prosecution. Usually there was silence put over the crimes that were committed by both sides in a peace accord. But ever since then, and obviously the Nazi crimes with the persecution of the Jews and the horrible crimes that took place both on the Eastern and the Western Front, the Allied powers could not stand idly by, but they had to do something and develop international law further. And this is why they thought that criminal law, you know, could be of benefit to international relations in order to have clear sort of criteria for what is allowed and what isn't on the international agenda.
But you decided to bring this up now in Armenia. There must be a reason for it.
Well, it's great that Armenia is now a member to the International Criminal Court, because the International Criminal Court that was founded in 1989 with the adoption of the so-called Rome Statute for the International Criminal Court is sort of a continuation of this idea, which I was just explaining, which was developed in 1945. All through the so-called Cold War, not much happened, but with the adoption of the Rome Statute, we have now not only sort of a symbolic, but we have a real institution that you can relate to in order to claim violations of these norms that were created in Nuremberg in 1945. And as Armenia has just acceded as a member state to the International Criminal Court, it's natural sort of for me as a director of the International Nuremberg Principles Academy to come here.
Mr. Safferling, the international community witnessed the forced deportation of more than 100,000 ethnic Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh. Does deportation fall under the jurisdiction of ICC?
Well, the ICC has jurisdiction over 4 crimes. One is genocide, the other being war crimes, the third being crimes against humanity, and a crime of aggression under certain circumstances. So deportation could fall under the concept of war crimes and under the concept of crimes against humanity. So indeed, if that takes place now on the territory of a member state, which is Armenia now, this can actually fall within the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court.
If it has been carried out by a state that is not a member of ICC, Azerbaijan, on its own territory, can it be held responsible?
Well, this is a little bit tricky, but obviously, as you have rightly said, it depends on the territory. Where did this crime happen? It must have happened either on the territory of a member state, or it must have been committed by a national of a member state. So when you then look at deportation as a crime, this has sort of a territorial spread, right? Because you have to leave your country or your hometown and go to another place. So you could look at both places and saying maybe even the place of, sort of not the place of origin where you went is a part of a member state, but the place where you have to refer to, where you have to go to, is part of a member state. So that could maybe give jurisdiction. This is uncertain. This has not been determined to 100% by the International Criminal Court. But it could be a good argument to say, well, these people had to flee from a non-member state to a member state, so there could be jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court because of that.
Armenia became a member only recently, and so Armenia can probably not take the case of deportation to ICC. But I know that other states can do it. And so I would like to get a clear answer to the question, can Azerbaijan be held responsible for forced deportation of Armenians or not if another member state takes the case to court?
Well, to be clear on one point, the cases that are heard by the International Criminal Court are not against the state, they're against individuals. It's an ordinary criminal court, so it's ordinary criminal law, and you need individual perpetrators. So it's not against Azerbaijan, it's against people officials, agents of Azerbaijan who then might be responsible for the deportation. And those indeed could be brought before the International Criminal Court if the court has jurisdiction. And there needs to be a referral of the situation to the court, and such a referral could be actually initiated by any member state.
Excellent. The political community uses the term ethnic cleansing to refer to the deportation of more than 100,000 Armenians from NK after 10 months of blockade and hunger, instead of the legal term deportation. Do you believe that this political euphemism is used intentionally to relieve Azerbaijan of a crime against humanity?
Well, ethnic cleansing as such is not a legal term. It's a political term, maybe an empirical term. To the best of my knowledge, it has developed in the context of the Bosnia War. But it's not a legal term. It's never been accepted. So you can't say automatically ethnic cleansing amounts to a crime against humanity.
But what happened was deportation, and deportation does fall under the category of crimes against humanity.
Deportation can qualify as a crime against humanity, and as can persecution. And persecution is maybe the term that comes from a legal perspective closest to what is generally referred to as ethnic cleansing. So persecution on ethnic grounds, on religious grounds, this is also qualifies and characterizes a crime against humanity.
So there are many angles from which this can be approached. Armenia released all Azeri prisoners as a manifestation of goodwill. There are no prisoners of war in Armenia right now, but Azerbaijan keeps NK's political leadership and about 100 prisoners of war in Baku prisons. The international community knows very well about this, and they have gone silent recently. What's your comments on this?
Well, I have to admit that from an international criminal point of view, international criminal law point of view, I can't really add much to that. This is obviously a political scenario which has to be solved on a political level. I can't see where international criminal law can actually add to the solution of this problem for the time being.
Armenian authorities refrain from starting a new legal procedure against Baku, this time at ICC, obviously not to harm the peace process. Who could do this for Armenia, and who do you think will?
Well, this is again obviously a hot political topic, and this is what differentiates ordinary criminal law, which we are used to because it sort of governs our daily life, to international criminal law, because this is on a political sphere. This has a lot to do with state agents, state responsibility. So it's much more complex, and it's not as reliable, as a matter of fact, as our national criminal law should be. It is always sort of within the political necessities and lies within the political sort of potentials behind that. So,
theoretically, any member state could do that.
Right? Indeed, yeah. Any member state could call on the International Criminal Court to look into a situation.
So political will is what is lacking.
Yeah, that's what I meant. You have to see this in the bigger picture, and of course, peace accords, peace treatments, peace settlements, and so forth could call for being a little more cautious about implementing international criminal law because of that. But by the end of the day, I would always sort of promote or sort of ask for the fulfillment of the so-called Nuremberg principles in international criminal law, because justice can be the basis for peace, and I think nothing else.
When supposedly someone else applies to ICC for us, will our case be prioritized? I mean, can Azerbaijan's backdooring Russian oil to the West outweigh justice?
Well, this is again a question that pertains a lot to the political environment here within different states as I involved.
The question, I think, is ICC a politicized legal organization or not?
Well, the ICC has different organs, and one of the organs is the Office of the Prosecutor. We have a chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, and it is up to him to develop a strategy within the framework of the law, what he actually prioritizes as cases. And as the judiciary is independent, also the Office of the Prosecutor and the prosecutor himself is independent, so it's really up to him to decide according to the legal framework that he has, you know, which cases he will bring forward and prioritize.
If the court is politically impartial, then I assume we can hope for a tribunal for Azerbaijan's aggression, just like Ukrainians are hoping for a tribunal for Russian aggression.
Well, the thing with aggression as a crime is that it exists also within the realm of the International Criminal Court. It is a statute crime. However, the International Criminal Court can actually not prosecute the crime of aggression if not both parties agree and submit to the jurisdiction of the court. And I don't think that it will be in both cases, in Russian case and the Azerbaijani case.
Are you saying that even if a tribunal is set up, it's going to be useless unless Russia agrees to submit to the procedures?
Well, what I'm saying is that the International Criminal Court doesn't have the power to adjudicate over the crime of aggression unless Russia and Azerbaijan agree. Where if you were to establish a unique structure like a special tribunal, that's a different story. You can always do that with regard to the crime of aggression. I mean, you can do that when you have sort of partners who are willing to support you, be it the United Nations, be it the European Union, whoever else could do that. But you can see when you look at the Ukraine-Russia situation that the international community is discussing this very ambiguously, and I can't foresee sort of the outcome of whether there will be a special tribunal for the crime of aggression in the case of Ukraine or Russia. I don't know.
Are you implying that a change of procedures is being looked at?
Well, a change of procedure, as I said, the ICC is not of help here because he's not empowered for the crime of aggression as it is. That's the law as it stands. So if you want the crime of aggression to be adjudicated, to be prosecuted, you need a different structure. Yeah, you need to establish some new tribunal. And that is what the international community discusses in order to be empowered to adjudicate the case and indeed prosecute the crime of aggression with regard to Russia in Ukraine. But there are several solutions on the table and all have their difficulties in implementing. So for the time being, I cannot foresee what will happen.
By the way, Russia has been an accomplice in Azerbaijan's aggression and deportation, according to some experts at least, and whatever obviously seems to be the picture, would this play a role in forming a tribunal?
I don't know so much about the facts of that case so that I could say that. I mean, the only thing that I could say it simply is that if a crime occurs on the territory of a member state, i.e. on Armenia in that case, you know, everybody who is responsible for that crime can be prosecuted, be Azerbaijani, be it Russian. Everybody who takes part in this crime can actually be a perpetrator and can be brought before the ICC.
And last but not least, among other political whims, Azerbaijan demands that Armenia withdraws claims from international courts, obviously because they are losing the cases. What should Armenia do in your estimation, and what consequences can doing that have for any further legal procedures that they might decide to undertake?
This is very, very difficult for me to say. I'm not an expert in Armenian politics or in the politics of the region altogether.
Let me put this differently. Would it harm Armenia's reputation on international platforms if Armenia does withdraw the claims?
Well, from a general perspective, I would say a court proceeding is better than a war and than an armed conflict. So to bring arguments before a court and exchange views and then let the court decide is better than anything else. Of course, it presupposes that all parties agree with the proceedings. But as far as I can see, of course, there's now political struggle over it. But both Azerbaijan and Armenia have sort of submitted claims to the court, to the International Court of Justice in The Hague. So why not go ahead and let the court decide? This would be sort of a, reasonable approach to solve the problem.
Thank you so much. One more time.
You're very welcome.
ICC expert Professor Christoph Safferling sat down with the First Analytical tonight.